Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Froggie, a retro platformer for the Nintendo Switch. As the name implies, this is meant to be a return to old school gaming, with all of the graphics being in black and white. The music is, for the most part, chiptune, and the controls are ridiculously simple. You run, jump, and wall jump. That's about as complicated as things get. Your objective is to simply get to the door with the frog symbol on it to end the level. None of the levels have names, they're just level 1, level 2, etc. Even though you die in one hit, you have unlimited lives, it only takes a couple of seconds to respawn, and most of the levels have checkpoint flags. Now, so far it seems like this is a pretty solid game. It's a nice throwback to the old style, and for people that craved the more retro-like graphics, this should be the game for you, right? Unfortunately, I hated nearly every second of this game, and most of it comes down to it has so many elements that feel like no-brainers in game development, and yet somehow the cutting floor didn't even realize that they were problems. And you might be thinking, now Paul, you're going to get into extreme nitpick territory here. But when a bunch of nitpicks add up to an overall frustrating experience, it can seem more aggravating than it really is. For starters, I am one of those people that likes to browse through the options whenever I start up a game, because I want to know if there are accessibility options, if I'm able to turn off the sound effects so that it doesn't get in the way of the background music when I'm recording, and sure enough, there is an option to adjust the music and the sound effects. Except that it doesn't work. I turned the music all the way up and the sound effects all the way down. The sound effects still played even though they were all the way down. Then there's the fact that if you pause the game at any point, it forces you to restart the level. Pausing the game. How many other games, even the most broken, buggy messes, can you think of where pausing a game requires you to restart the level? Thankfully, if you're playing this on the Switch, there is a home button that can offset that problem, and the levels don't have a time limit, so it's not like you're rushing yourself, but that still feels like such an elementary problem. The levels also just don't feel very interesting. The black and white aesthetic sometimes makes the level name blend in with the background, and sometimes it took me a bit to figure out where my character even was because everything was just the same shade, so there wasn't enough to differentiate Froggie from everything else. There are a lot of spike traps, and normally I don't like instant death spikes, but when everything is instant death, I guess it's more okay. But what really bothers me about this game is that there are quite a few levels that involve screen scrolling, but the screen doesn't actually scroll. You have to make a wall jump to get to a wall that's above the view of the camera because this game just does not want to have the screen scroll. Everything has to be exactly in place. No camera controls, no scrolling. So there's one particular level where there is a wall on one side and spikes on the other, so I'd have to wall jump off the wall on the right to go over the barrier of the screen, so then it would transition, and then I'd hit the wall on the other screen on the left, but because the bed of spikes was right below, I would often fall into the spikes just trying to orient myself in position. That's the kind of level design that you do not want. Admittedly, Celeste kind of did this as well, where sometimes you'd have to wall jump above the screen, but at least in that game, they didn't have a bunch of invisible obstacles preventing you from making the jump. There's also the fact that there's really nothing to Froggie. It's a very simple game with no story, no dialogue, no ulterior motives, no crazy level themes, except near the end of the game it changes to more of like a sci-fi element with conveyor belts. Ooh. There's not really any fanfare after you beat the game, you just get a message that says thanks for playing. Speaking of beating the game, this game boasts having 100 levels, which sounds pretty impressive. Like, that's a lot of levels. The problem is that there's actually only 50. The catch is that after you get past level 50, you play through the entire game again, but backwards. Now, normally this is the kind of twist that I would find is incredible, but I think that that's false advertising, because every other game would tell you, oh, you've unlocked a mirror mode, whereas this game just assumes that you consider all these 50 levels brand new. And while I'm sure it's a feat of design genius to have to design the levels in such a way that you can play them both ways, I do feel like it artificially inflates the replay value. Another major flaw in this game's design faux pas department is that there's only one music track, and that music track continuously loops throughout the whole game, never stopping, never pausing. 100 levels. They couldn't even compose different themes. Now, some of you might be thinking that I'm being a bit too unfair. It's a retro platformer, so of course it's going to feel like an old school game. The problem is that I've played other retro platformers that are of this similar style, and they don't have all these problems. VVVVVV was meant to be a callback to the Commodore 64, but that game had multiple music tracks. Each of the levels were named after some kind of pop culture reference. There was a little bit of a story, not very much, but still something. And there was an interconnected map that helped you feel like there was an exploration element to it. It also had the hook of, instead of jumping, your character would switch gravity. So it had something to set it apart. This game has literally nothing. It could just be a run-of-the-mill, make-your-own platformer type of game that could probably be whipped up by anyone who has amateur game design skills. But none of the levels feel spectacular. The most good things I can say about the game is that it's simple and the controls work okay, but I still didn't feel like I could nail the jumps as easily as I could in, say, a Mario or Sonic game. I paid a little over $2, not my own money, thankfully I had gift card money, and I felt like it was a bit of a rip-off even at that low price. Sure, some people may get enjoyment out of the fact that it's simple and easy to learn and they like challenging platformers, but when it's unfair and has really weird design quips such as pausing the game, making the levels reset themselves, the checkpoint flags being spread apart too much, wall jumping between screens is frustrating, and there's no other music track besides the one that you get, you're going to find a pretty frustrating and underwhelming experience. I would suggest if you pick up this game, only do it if you're absolutely desperate for a challenging platformer. But even then, there are so many better options like VVVVVV, Celeste, Shovel Knight. Just pick up one of those instead. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comment section if you have any questions, concerns, or critiques. Special thanks to my patrons Matthew Rakowski, Spoon Ghost, and Splatcat for their contributions on Patreon. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!